Welcome back. The Assam Chief Minister has said that the drive against child marriage is a drive against a social evil and it will continue. Whereas opposition members in the state are calling it a publicity stunt, hazardously executed and ill-conceived. That has only left behind a trail of broken families. Let's be very clear, no one is contesting here that child marriage is a menace. And also the fact that it is prevalent more among poorer sections across states. It's not a problem specific to Assam or exclusive to Assam. But is there a better way of going about this? Joining me here on the program is Gaurav Gogoi, Indian National Congress Deputy Leader in the Lok Sabha and Member of Parliament from Assam. Very good evening, Gaurav. Thank you so much for joining us here on Mirror Now. I want to begin by asking you, what exactly are our concerns here?
Thank you, Afrida.
State government in its wisdom has decided to enforce a law. I spoke to the NCPCR chairperson earlier. He says law enforcement is the state government's job. What are we worried about?
Thanks, Afrida. Afrida, in our country, there are many social evils. And if you study how these social evils have been eradicated, it has never focused only on a law enforcement approach. If you think that only by enforcing the law, social evils would be eradicated, then by now there would have been no kidnapping, no robbery, no rapes, no hijacking, no child trafficking, because police are cracking down every day, arresting those who are criminals. But it doesn't work like that. If it's a socially prevalent practice, you have to focus on education. You have to put the women at the center of your policy making. You have to consult with women and put them and take their suggestions. And what has happened now is that you have more and more teenage pregnant women who, instead of going to a hospital to deliver their children, out of fear of government reprisal, they are going back to their homes and delivering their child in very unsafe conditions, not taking the help of any local community health worker. And as a result, just today we got news that a teenage girl died because of pregnancy complications. Now, is the state government going to take care of that infant who is now going to grow up without a mother, about the infant whose father is in jail? So this is not, you said in your opening question that the state government in its wisdom. No, Afrida, it's not wisdom. It's mere foolishness and it's a mere thirst for publicity that this government has gone down
so
this route.
So are you then saying there was a better way of doing this?
National issue, 23%.
Yes, go ahead.
Absolutely, Afrida. If it was my government in the state of Assam, we would have a child marriage focused officer in every district and every block who would get data on if there is any marriage which is going to take place this year onwards, in which one of the two are below the age of 18. We would focus on girl education, because during COVID, many girls dropped out of schools. We would ensure that those girls are not being married off, they are brought back to schools. We would incentivize parents to send their girls for higher education instead of getting them married off. And we would have a massive communication campaign telling young men and women that this is the time, their youth is time to be productive and do something economically viable and sustain their families. So we would have a 360 degrees approach. The police would be better prepared, the courts would be better prepared. One of the foolish things that this government has done is to implement the law retrospectively. Yes. And we have seen in many cases, retrospective action does not work.
It is not illegal, though, according to the experts that we have spoken to. If a law is in place and if there is an FIR, apparently you cannot argue that you cannot make an arrest under that law because it took place so many years ago. That is number one. Number two, I want to ask you, I get your point, what you're saying, that this is not the way to address a social problem. We are not denying there is a problem here. But, you know, it is also being said that this problem is more than just child marriage. There's child trafficking. And Mr. Kanungo went to the extent of saying there is institutionalized rape.
Well, that's a completely different issue. Child trafficking is an issue that I have raised in the past as well, that during COVID and prior to COVID, many children are being taken away from from their villages and are sent to institutions in Gujarat. Sometimes I have found cases where organizations linked to the ruling party are taking children away from Assam and putting them in orphanages all the way in Gujarat, in an alien culture, in a completely different environment. So that's a completely different issue. But in the case of Assam, they have done police crackdowns before as well. They have cracked down on drugs, they have cracked down on kidnappings, on robbers, but ordinary robberies are still going up. Drug-related trafficking is still going up. So the fact that the police have failed against enforcing or bringing down the number of drug trafficking cases, the fact that police have failed to bring down number of kidnappings and ordinary crime only gives further proof that only having a police-only approach does not work.
You are a two-time member of parliament from Assam, Mr. Gogoi. You represent one of the very poor constituencies of Koliabor in Assam. I want to ask you, and we'll put out those figures, if you look at the national health figures, survey report figures, it's abysmal, isn't it? I come from that state, as you know, and I was quite pained to see that the figures of Assam are way above the national average, whether you look at married before 18 years, pregnancy between 15 to 19 years, malnutrition, maternal mortality, infant mortality. I'm sure you're aware that, you know, these are not figures that, and if you, it's like you're damned if you do, if you're damned if you don't. And you would be the one to question the current government that what are we doing about this after the report is out?
No, I don't deny the statistics, Afrida. I am well aware in terms of malnutrition, in terms of anemia, in terms of maternal mortality, in terms of infant mortality, our numbers are much worse than the national average. We had the same numbers during our time. We were in power in Assam for 15 years, and reducing maternal mortality was a primary focus of our then Congress government as well. And if you do look at the numbers from 2001 to 2016, maternal mortality did come down. And how did we do that? We incentivized institutional delivery. We incentivized women to give birth in hospitals. We incentivized women to go for higher education, access to schools. We incentivize women to be economically independent through self-help groups and become female entrepreneurs. We incentivize women to be more politically aware about their rights granted in the Constitution and the law by taking part in panchayat and local municipal council elections. And that is how, through empowering women, at the end of it, you know, we are talking about women, and if you want to build women leadership, or if you want to have women health as a primary concern, you have to put women at the center. I doubt if the Chief Minister of Assam, Himanta Biswa Sharma, consulted any organization, consulted any women's group, consulted any child rights expert before doing this
Gaurav, on this, if you heard Mr. Kailash Satyarthi from the Bachpan Bachao Andolan, he says government decision to eliminate child marriage by penalizing perpetrators is a welcome step. It says that the state must provide financial assistance and legal support and rehab, but that does not take away from the fact that this action was needed. And not just that, like I mentioned, the National Child Rights Body also is now saying that same should be done everywhere else.
Well, with respect to Mr. Kailash Satyarthi, you know, his foundation is working in Haryana, which has 2 lakh cases of child marriage. And they have done a state consultation. They have, in that, they have talked about making an FIR mandatory, but nowhere when it comes to their consultations in Haryana, did they propose a retrospective action. Look, I'm all for a tough crackdown, but it has to be progressive. Now, if daily wage laborers who are already married, if they are arrested, who's going to feed their child? If you're going to crack down on teenagers who wanting to give birth in the safe environment of a hospital, you're going to make the matters worse. Maternal mortality might even rise as a result of more unsafe deliveries being done at home. So, with all due respect to Kailash Satyarthi, I believe this action needs to be progressive, and not only police. In Haryana, Kailash Satyarthi Foundation talk about incentives. They also talk about a child prohibition officer. None of these steps have been taken in Assam. Right.
So what exactly are you proposing at the moment? There is a issue, a social evil staring at our faces. Some action needs to be taken. You're saying this would need a long-term approach, address education, address poverty, address women empowerment. That's a long-term approach. In the short term, is there anything that you would say?
Afrida, if you don't get the buy-in and the support of the local civilians, of the local people of the state, then you might hammer down as much as possible, but that is not going to effect change. Change is only going to happen when people accept the wisdom of what you're saying and people take ownership. And for people to take ownership, we have to focus on education and empowerment. In the short term, I must say that the retrospective effect of these cases must be gone. The government has to come up with an alternative mechanism to penalize families who have child marriage. But when it comes to being progressive, the government can continue to be progressive, but should also focus on other aspects as well. But as I said, right from day one, I have seen this government being very short-sighted. They are not looking at it from a comprehensive view. This is only being done to gain certain limelight for a short time, and it's been completely thoughtless, as a result of which one girl has already committed suicide, one infant is going to grow up without a mother. And that is on the hands of the Chief Minister.
One very last question to you. I take the points that you're making. We've reported about those incidents as well. But you are saying that this is not going to act as a deterrence. What would you say to those who believe that pani sir se upar chala gaya hai Assam mein? It's very rampant. There is no awareness program that can change this mindset. Might as well go for it and crack down on these child marriages. The word will spread. Deterrence will happen. What would you say in response to that?
I would say please study the history of India. Any major social reform has always come through community participation, whether it's the right to information movement, whether it was the social reformer. One of the greatest social reformer in terms of women's right is Raja Ram Mohan Roy. And again, he talked about empowerment. Even the person you mentioned, Kailash Satyarthi, his approach was not that of law enforcement alone. It was all about community participation, economic upliftment, as well as political empowerment. So I to all those who believe in just law and order approach, please read the history of social reform in India.
Well, on that note, thank you so much, Gaurav Gogoi, for joining us. Some very important perspectives and insights into this problem. I hope people who are the policymakers are listening, and I hope this is a matter that will be taken very seriously. There are young lives involved, young lives from my home state of Assam. Thank you, Gaurav, for joining us.
Thank you.